Hello, everyone. Welcome to another review. Today, I'm going to be doing something kind of halfway between a bite-sized review and a book review, thoughts on books video. I'm going to be doing a movie review for Annihilation, and then I'm going to talk about the book, which I read. Um, so, yeah, where do I begin? I saw the trailer for the movie when it first came out. It was on like Reddit front page, and I'm like, this looks interesting. Everyone in the comments was like, "Oh, I'm excited, man! This is adapting from a really good book." And so I looked up the book, and I'm like, this seems interesting too. It's kind of like almost seems like a Michael Crichton sort of bio thriller deal. And I'd never read any Michael Crichton, but I'm like, this seems interesting, and I've never had the chance to read a book and then immediately see the new adaptation um, come out. Aside from like but that wasn't really like that was Annihilation came out 4 years ago, so it's kind of a new book rather than like where it's been around since like 81 or something like that, 89, 87. Ding. So I was really interested to read the book and then see the movie, which I did. Um, which do I want to do first? I think I'll do the book first, and then I'll talk about the movie. Um, so I'll put in the since I can't do annotations anymore, I'll put in the video description to jump to just the movie. This is going to be spoilers, by the way, for the whole thing, because it's a pretty notable thing. Annihilation, it's pretty big. So if you haven't seen the movie, read the book, um, before I hop into spoilers, I'll just say the book is pretty solid, pretty enjoyable, fairly short, part of a trilogy, and it ends on something of a pretty solid cliffhanger. So it's meant to kind of lead right into the next book, sort of, meant to be continued in the trilogy, let's say. So it's not like a one and done kind of story, the book, but it's really compelling, really interesting. Slow in a few places, but it keeps moving. It's like 200 pages. The movie is okay. The movie is, keep this in mind, the movie is mostly not what the book is. The framework is the same, where it's a bunch of female scientists go into a place called Area X. It's called the Shimmer in the movie, but they go into Area X, and all of the events that happen in Area X in the movie are completely different than what happens in the book. He totally was it Garrett something, the guy Ex Machina guy who wrote and directed the movie. Um, Everything that happens in Area X completely different than what happens in the book. And the movie kind of ends on more of a final note. I don't know if they're planning on doing more in the series, adapting to film, but the movie can almost be its own standalone story. So keep that in mind. If you want to see the movie, know that it's not 80% of the book is not in the movie. Just know that. Not that that's a bad thing. Like I said, the movie is all right. The ending is actually pretty cool, pretty wild. Handful of things I didn't like about the movie. Some of them being just kind of acting choices, dialogue. But it's mostly kind of in the early to middle stage of the movie, and then it gets better as it goes on. So that's kind of what I have to say. Read the book if you like a quick, nice thriller book. Watch the movie if you're into some kind of top shelf, highbrow, kind of weird bio thriller stuff. That's all I have to say. So, getting into spoilers for the book. Assuming you've read the book, I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed it. It went by quick. It felt a little formless at times, but that's sort of in its like epistolary nature, because it is taken from the field journal of the biologist. So that was like, okay, whatever. Some things could have been tweaked a little bit here and there. Just some of her expounding, I don't know if it really helped her character. Things could have been trimmed a little bit here and there, but I wasn't too picky about it. One thing that I really appreciated about this book, like going into it, um, I want to say, is Jeff Vandermeer considered a postmodern author? Doesn't look like it. Metafiction, horror, science fiction, weird fiction. Alex Garland is the name of the director who did the movie. I want to just double check and make sure that this isn't like a postmodern book. Science fiction, horror. It doesn't look like it. Okay. Maybe one of his other books is. But I was going into this thinking, like, is this just going to be some like hoity-toity, pretentious something that isn't actually like a good story? But it kicks off right away. It kicks off like immediately going in. And of course, like, right away someone goes missing. Right away, they find them dead. And I'm like, all right, we're rocking and rolling. We're just going right in there. I feel like the book was kind of padded a little bit with, like I said before, her expounding on like her husband and their marriage and looking at things in a pool when she was a kid as a biologist. And that kind of felt like it was making the pace of the book a little disjointed. And I mean, I don't know how I would have done it differently myself. Like I said, I think it's fine. But maybe a little bit of restructuring. I don't know. I don't want to like critique that. It was just something maybe subjective to me when it comes to the pacing of a book. Like when I read Fahrenheit 451, it goes A to B, no hitches, no speed bumps, no roadblocks. It's just like an easy go. And that's kind of what I'm trying to make with my book, where it's just like as soon as it starts, you're like on a good pace, a good clip, and all of the character development, all the exposition is happening in real time as you're going. I think in my book, sorry to jump ship here, but I think in my book there's only like one flashback sequence, and it happens for like a couple pages, but everything else is kind of linear and goes on the thing. Not that nonlinear is bad. I mean, obviously this book is nonlinear, where she's talking about things from the past in the middle of her journal as things are happening. But sometimes it can ruin the pace of a book. I don't think it did in this case, but I don't know why I'm hovering on this point for so long. It's not a big deal. It's just this book was good enough to where I'm kind of giving it a little more, going a little harder on it than I probably should be. But whatever. So kicks off right away. I thought that the tower was super interesting. I don't know what's going on there. I can speculate. I'm part ways into the second book. It's much slower, much more expounding, much more, I don't want to say rambly, but wordy than this book was. This book's a lot tighter than the second book so far. So I can only speculate. But the tower almost seems like this weird, like, what a copy of the lighthouse or something. I can't quite remember the description of the tower as they're going down, but like the fact that the crawler basically is the lighthouse keeper, I was like, whoa, that's interesting. That whole segment near the end where she sees the lighthouse keeper, it made me realize like this might just be like a really bizarre haunted lighthouse story. Like this might just be like an isolated, simple tragedy involving someone who had this lighthouse. And I thought that was really interesting. I like when these kind of grand, spectacular spectacles, it's redundant, these grand spectacles kind of culminate into something very small and intimate, which is why I love Bioshock Infinite so much. Like, there's this huge, giant story, right? And it all comes down to a man and his child, his daughter. And everything spreads from that. Everything, the whole story, grand and epic in scope, comes from a very small and intimate place. And I see that happening with this story in Annihilation, in the Southern Reach series. So that makes me excited if that's the case. I'm super into that. And if that's the case, I can't wait to get into Acceptance, the last book. I think it's Acceptance. Anyway, yeah, like I said, excited about that. What else? I don't have much to say on the book because it's pretty short. Like I said, it raises a lot of questions. It doesn't give easy answers. It makes you really fascinated the entire time. It sets up a lot of compelling things to go off of for the next books in the series. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot of negative things to say about this book. Maybe just some pacing issues, but maybe that was just me. So yeah, good. So hopping in to the movie now. The movie. I'll say the issues I had with the movie and then the things I like. The movie, the acting, Natalie Portman, I don't know what it is. It's really hard to get a great performance out of her. I'm sorry. Like Black Swan, maybe the best, but I don't know. Most of the actresses in this movie, I wasn't connecting to. Oscar Isaac was okay. I mean, he didn't have much to do in it. Jennifer Jason Leigh was all right. The woman who ties everyone up and is going crazy, she was kind of annoying. Yeah, the acting wasn't fantastic. I'm sorry. I'm like, I need my coffee apparently. The events that happen in the movie, like I said before at the beginning of the video, everything in the Area X, as soon as they enter, not what happens in the book at all. It ends at the lighthouse. That's the only similarity. The only one. The psychologist dies at the lighthouse. That's another similarity. That's about it. I thought it was super interesting that the movie opened with something coming from space and hitting the lighthouse, and then it shows the title. I'm like, okay, we're just jumping right on in. We're just getting right on in there. That brings me to another thing. The exposition in this movie is flipped from how it works in the book. In the book, like, I don't want to spoil the book too much, but I'm only taking things that are from the movie and the book at the same time and talking about them. I'm not going to give you any information from the book that isn't in the movie in this part. In the book, you find out about the border expanding and the lighthouse kind of being the center. The border expanding, you find out at the very end, when the psychologist is dying at the lighthouse. She does, like, basically the moment in the movie where Natalie Portman gets to the lighthouse, finds a psychologist. Psychologist tells her the border is expanding there in the book. In the movie, it's like one of the first things that happens at the Southern Reach. As far as I remember, you can't see the border in the book, but in the movie, it's just like it's all right there, which it's okay. I don't care. But yeah, none of the locations in the movie are in the book, aside from the lighthouse, which I think is bizarre. I don't know why Alex Garland, the writer director, kind of threw out most of the stuff and just sort of rewrote his own thing. I don't know what happened with that. There's a moment where they're at that abandoned Southern Reach base before the border, when the border was smaller, it like took it over. And they're watching, and they see the fence gets broken into, and the editing is really bad in this part. They're like looking. It's like, oh wait, hold on, the fence is broken open, and it just cuts to one of the women with like a bear just like jumping on her, like ah, and then like it cuts back, like what, huh? And like the editing is so bad in this part. Like for some reason, this is like one of the only bad editing jobs in the movie. Was like it was comical. This bear jumping on this woman and dragging her away. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. It's really janky and a weird scene. That stood out to me. But I liked the flower people. Context. Let's give some context. I liked the concept that like the whole place was refracting everything, basically blending all the DNA. So people's DNA was they were turning into flowers. Flowers were turning into people. Flowers would come up from the ground and become the shape of people. So there was like these figures that were just flowers and wood, and that was cool. That was a great visual. That one woman, I forget what role she was, philanthropist. Just like flowers growing from her body, and then like walking around the corner. Natalie Portman goes in and she just sees the field of flower people, and she like doesn't know which one is her. I thought that was like, and that just cuts to the lighthouse. I'm like, that's a cool place to cut it. That's good. I'll talk about the lighthouse here. It's see, at the beginning of the movie, I thought it was crazy that they showed something coming down from space and hitting the lighthouse. Because in the book, they go into Area X to be like, what is causing all this weird stuff to happen? What's going on? They're like, is it extraterrestrial? Is it some kind of like terrorist attack? What is it? And in the movie, it's just like extraterrestrial. It came from space and it hit the lighthouse. First thing you see. And I'm like, what? But then as the movie went on and nothing from the book was happening, I was like, okay, maybe he didn't know. Because Alex Garland wrote this screenplay based off of the, I think, manuscript of the first book before the second book was out. So he only had Annihilation to work with. He didn't have authority or acceptance. So I'm like, okay, maybe he's just making something up. Maybe this isn't actually the way it goes. Because I thought that I was getting a spoiler in the movie for something I hadn't read yet. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Maybe. We'll see. I assume it's extraterrestrial, right? It like has to be. But yeah, Natalie Portman gets to the lighthouse and she sees like all these crystal trees, like really great visuals. This whole last 20, 30 minutes is so good. Very 2001-esque, where it's like bizarre things are happening and you kind of have to take them on aesthetic and metaphor almost, and just kind of take it on a subconscious level. You kind of get the sense that from the lighthouse, all of these things are stemming, like all of this weird, bizarre DNA changing. She goes like down into the hole that the crater made, and psychologist is there, and she just like basically barfs up some gold glowy dust and becomes this cool and then Natalie Portman's blood falls into it and a duplicate is made. She sees like the body of her husband. That's really cool. Oh, the music. I want to talk about the music. I need to play some music here, okay? This was another critique I had. So there's two very noticeable, there's a very disparate dichotomy, separation happening in the soundtrack here. During the final part of the movie, basically as soon as that weird like thing is made that sucks her blood in and becomes a copy of her, which was really off-putting and creepy, uncanny valley. That was really cool. The I think it's this. Let's see if I can play it. This is good. Moderate. It's good. Really good soundtrack for that section. But then, like earlier in the movie, when they're like walking through and looking at weird animals and alligators and stuff, and walking through the forest, it plays music. Like this. Is this it? No. There's this weird guitar. Here it is. I think this is it. No. Yeah. Like really bland guitar. I'm not going to play more of that. I don't want to get caught. Where it goes from like doom 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 doom, looking at weird things. I'm like, this is kind of boring music, and then like suddenly it kicks it into like 10th gear for the very end. It's like my cat. Hello. I was like, this is really bizarre. Why was there boring music at the beginning and then all of a sudden it's awesome for the last 20 minutes? Super effective. I loved it. And then the movie ends on a kind of finality. Like she basically kills this entity that is doing all of this stuff at the lighthouse, and then it seems like everything breaks away and the border is gone. She goes back, and you question, like, has she changed? Is the man her husband? And then their eyes glow different colors, and the movie's over. So it kind of like is set up to be possibly have a sequel, you know. Hey, what you doing? What you doing? But it doesn't need one. So the fact that it was very loosely adapted, like this almost seems like The Shining by Kubrick, where it's like, as far as I can tell, like I haven't read the book of The Shining still, but as far as I can tell, most of the significant events in the book are either not in the movie or highly changed. You know, even character arcs and all that. So that's when I realized, like, okay, if you're gonna do this, that's all right. If you're gonna take the framework and kind of just change everything in it, that's okay. Like my Dark Tower critique, though, I don't mind if you change a lot of things, but just don't change what makes the thing the thing. And in the movie, Alex Garland didn't do that, thankfully. It still feels like Annihilation, more or less, even if events from the book weren't wholly present. It wasn't like a total... Get out of there. Just walking around. It wasn't a total train wreck. Highly different, but it didn't get over that line, at least for me. So yeah, that's all. That's most of what I have to say. Great book, decent movie. The movie was very bold, very risky. I hope more people see it. This whole it's time nonsense. No one's talking about Annihilation, right? Like it has to be a movie like Ghostbusters where the fact that it's an all-female cast is the selling point, whereas Annihilation is just telling a story. Sorry to get like on a political tangent here, but like Annihilation is a solid story. It's a solid movie that just so happens to have all women in it. It doesn't draw attention to that. It's just a thing that happened. Isn't that the way it should be? Shouldn't it be just a natural thing that we don't raise our eyebrows at? Why does it need to be, it's time. Look, this is a movie with all women in it. That's in the marketing. No, like that turns people off. That turns people off. If you don't highlight that, people are more likely to enjoy it. Annihilation, in case in point. Just saying. This whole it's time thing, like Annihilation is happening, and this movie totally went under everybody's radar. Crazy. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you everyone for watching. I might do a thoughts on books thing for the next two books that I read, Authority and Acceptance. I finished The Princess Bride. I think I might do a thoughts on books for that sometime soon. What else do I have in the pipeline? I feel like there was a book that I wanted to read after all is said and done, but I don't remember what it was. I'm still working on my book. That's taken enough time as it is. So yeah, thank you everyone for watching. If you want more of these, please feel free to subscribe. I try to make them as often as I can. I'm a busy person, but I want to keep making these things. So, thank you. Stay true.